Craigslist is not something I would use often. I mean, less than once a year for sure. But sometimes it's just the easiest way to sell something that would otherwise be impossible to sell quickly. However, after this happened to me about 3 years ago, I never used Craigslist again. I was 22 at the time and lived in a very small house with a roommate of mine for over a year before he moved out. The lease ended in a few months anyways, and without a roommate to split the rent with, I could no longer afford the property. Thus, I had to move out as well. It wasn't too hard to find an apartment, but it was way smaller than the house was. This meant that I pretty much needed to get rid of all of my furniture. The couch was basically unused, and my roommate and I bought it just over a year ago when he moved in, so it would be a total waste to just put it on the side of the road for someone to pick up. The thing was expensive, and I could really use any extra money to help with the move, so of course I resorted to Craigslist. This was my first time ever selling anything on the site, as I was always the one to buy stuff instead. I'd never had any weird experiences, aside from just the awkward feeling of being in someone else's house and meeting a stranger. Though, being the person selling this time, I felt much more comfortable since I would be at my house. Anyway, it took a bit over 2 weeks for someone who was seriously interested to reply to the ad and ask to come check it out. He ended up calling me to ask a few questions about it. Honestly, it made me feel better, since I assumed he was probably just trying to be safe and make sure I wasn't some creep. His name was David, and he told me that he moved into a new house and needed some cheap furniture to fill the space. I mentioned that I was in the exact opposite position, leaving my house for an apartment. He responded, asking politely why I was leaving, to which I told him that my roommate left, so I couldn't really afford it anymore. He sounded nice though, which I guess made me tell him more than I should have. We set a time after we were both off of work on a Saturday evening around 6 o'clock. When that time came around, I left the front door open and waited. I sat on the couch for over an hour just waiting for the guy to show up before eventually shutting the front door and going to the kitchen to make some food, assuming he just bailed on me. But then the doorbell rang only minutes later. It was 7:30 at this point, so I was obviously a little upset, but I tried to fake a smile and opened the door. "Hey, I'm David," he said as he held his hand out for a handshake. He was a tall, larger man with a very large grin on his face. I shook his hand and invited him inside, showing him into the living room. He looked at it for a second, nodding his head in approval, before I heard footsteps outside the front door, followed by it opening and 2 more men walking inside. "Sorry, these are my buddies that are moving in with me. Hope you don't mind." "Oh, yeah, that's fine," I said nervously, knowing that there wasn't much I could do about it. Honestly, I was starting to get really uneasy though, and had a bad feeling in my gut. I tried to not think about it, telling myself I was overthinking it, but my feelings would not suppress. David walked to the other side of the couch and knelt down a bit as if he was inspecting something. Then he stood back up. "What's this over here?" he said, pointing down at the side of the couch. With the other 2 men standing behind me, I reluctantly walked over to where he was standing and looked down at the couch. "I don't see anything." He pointed again, as if he wanted me to get down and look. The 2 other men came closer, standing in front of me, while David was behind me. Slowly, I knelt down and looked at the side, still not seeing anything. I could feel all of them breathing over me, making me feel powerless and terrified. "I'm just messing with ya. There's nothing there," David exclaimed, giving me a hard pat on the back as I stood up. I let out a nervous chuckle and moved myself a few steps away. I could see the other men had creepy smiles on their faces as they looked at David as if plotting something. I tried my best to remain calm and think of a way out of this situation, but they were in my house. I couldn't just leave, and I was too scared to ask them to leave. "So, do you like it?" I asked, trying to speed up this process. David looked at his friends and then back at me. His happy, smiling expression had shifted. There was a very odd moment of silence as I stared into David's empty eyes. A calm before the storm. One of the men tackled me to the ground, pinning me down aggressively. My instant reaction to resist was overpowered by his strength, and I gave up quickly, just hoping to not be any further harmed. David and the other man ran through the house, looting it of everything valuable, creating chaos and mess in all of the rooms. The man on top of me continued to hold me tightly, pushing my head into the hard wooden floor with all of his weight. After a few minutes, David called out by the front door, and the man got off of me and ran out of the house. I heard their truck pull out and speed off, as I laid on the ground in shock, pain, and terror. After a couple minutes, I gathered myself up and slowly stumbled to the front door to close and lock it. I called the cops soon after. To no one's surprise, David wasn't his real name, nor was the email or phone number attached to any identifiable person. They collected some fingerprints around the house and took pictures of their shoe prints on the ground, but the case ran cold with no suspects at all. The only thing they were able to identify was that the shoe prints left at my house were the same as ones left at someone else's house a few weeks ago during a similar attack and robbery. That person was also alone in their home. It's suspected that they try to find those who live alone, so obviously I kind of fucked myself over by telling the man about my roommate who had left. Either way, that experience has caused me a lot of stress and anger. I was blinded by the feeling of safety being in my own home, and was taken advantage of because of it. Sites like Craigslist are dangerous, and people need to be more aware of the dangers of willingly inviting unknown, seemingly innocent people into their homes. I tried buying a truck off of Craigslist some years ago, and before you say anything, it was a great price and I wasn't in the best financial situation. I'd never actually used Craigslist before, but I knew it was an average place for people to sell their stuff, which meant that it was usually cheap. Even with the cheap prices of cars on the site, I still had to ask my dad for money because I didn't even have the few $1,000s in my account that I needed in cash for a cheap car. After a bit of scrolling though, I messaged this guy who posted his truck for $4,000, and he got back pretty quickly, answering all of my questions on it and giving what sounded like honest answers. He basically said that it wasn't the nicest looking, but it'll get you where you gotta be in a reliable manner. Interested, he agreed to meet me at a Burger King that was a halfway point of where we both lived. I got there first, taking an Uber, and he showed up maybe 5 minutes later. We chatted for a bit, and he told me more about the truck, mentioning minor issues it's given him in the past, but nothing too serious. After all, I didn't have the money to be picky. Of course, I asked if I could test drive it, to which he said that he knew a less busy parking lot and I could test drive it there. Honestly, I was like, alright, whatever, and I took my phone out to get a quick Uber, but he said it was just across the street and that we could just ride together. I didn't want to be rude and had never done something like this before, so I kind of assumed it was a normal thing. Looking back, I should have told him to F off, but I was young and he was old, so for some reason I trusted him. As I got inside, he asked me if I had my license on me, which was just another reason I trusted him. He seemed like he was a genuine guy. He started driving, though we went a little further than across the street, probably a few blocks away from the Burger King, to this empty parking lot away from the main road, which was the first red flag to come up, even though it should have been the second or third. "Alright, let's switch," he said, putting the car in park. As we were passing each other around the car, he threw me the keys, saying heads up, but they landed nowhere near me. I mean, I would have had to dive into the concrete to catch them. Awkwardly, I went to pick them up, and just as I bent down, I felt the weight of his foot slam against my side, and before I knew it, he was on top of me, ripping my wallet out of my back pocket and running back towards the truck. I immediately grabbed the keys from the ground, thinking he must have forgotten them in the heat of the moment, and that I could possibly force a trade. Unfortunately though, the keys he threw at me must have just been fake, because he just drove away, leaving me stranded there stupidly. What makes everything worse is that it all happened so fast I couldn't even get the damn license plate. I still had my phone though, and the first thing I did was cancel the only card I had because I couldn't risk him spending money I didn't have, and then I called the police. I walked back to the Burger King and filed a report when they met me there, but with only the description of a rusty white truck and an average middle-aged white guy, nothing ever came of it. He took the ad down, and his email wasn't even a real name. Apparently it was just named after a video game character, and again, I didn't get his plates. So all in all, I lost $4,000 of straight cash, had to wait for a new card in the mail, had to get a new license, and they didn't even catch the guy. Moral of the story is, don't use Craigslist, and don't be as stupid as I was. I used to work for a big maid company, but I left after my ex-coworker told me that she was making more than triple just working by herself and listing ads on Craigslist Marketplace. So of course, I looked into it and eventually began doing that as well. I was making amazing money for close to 7 months before anything weird happened. Ever since, I have never encountered someone that creepy, and I hope I never do again. I had answered a usual email from someone asking me to clean their house. The way it works is they tell me what rooms they want me to do, and I charge the price based on how long I think it will take. To do this, I have to go to their house to make an estimate, or they can send me a video walkthrough. This is the way we did it at my old company, except I charge a much better price, and people feel more comfortable with the same person coming over every week. The man had sent me a video walkthrough of his house, and it was very clean already, which happens with a lot of clients who just want to maintain that cleanliness and have someone get the nitty-gritties. We set a date and time, and a few days later I went for the first time clean. I was going to be there for about 3.5 hours, doing the top and bottom floor, no basement, and giving extra care to the kitchen and bathroom tiles. He greeted me at the door and led me upstairs so I can work my way down, and this is where everything went to shit. I began cleaning, expecting him to leave, but he kind of just stands there watching me, which I sometimes have happen with older women who are control freaks, but this guy wasn't looking at what I was cleaning, he was eyeing me. I ask him if he wants me to do anything else, and he just stands there for a second.
You know, when I saw your ad on Craigslist, I knew I had to have you.
At first, I didn't think of this in any kind of flirty way. I just saw this as some older white guy telling me, a Mexican woman, that I was meant to be good at cleaning. I didn't really care. I've heard it all the time. They usually just say things out of ignorance. But I wanted the money, so I kept my mouth shut and faked a response.
Oh, well, thank you. I usually ask that people stay out of the room, though. It's just easier to clean that way.
He said no problem, but clearly there was, because while he left that room, he went to the room just across the hallway and sat on the bed and watched me from there. At this point, I was getting creeped out, and the thought of him watching me for 3.5 hours was very unsettling. I had an idea, and after I dusted, I started to vacuum, going behind the door so I could move it, leaving it only cracked open slightly, so that for the rest of this room at least, he wouldn't be able to look at me. I just had to get through this day, get paid, and never come here again. I moved to the bathroom that was connected to the room. I was about 20 minutes in, and scrubbing grout when I felt that I was being looked at again. I turned around, and sure enough, he was there in the doorway.
Sorry to bother you. I forgot to tell you to leave the vanity as is. It was my wife's. She died years ago in '09. It's been really rough, going through all that, so I want to preserve it.
I said okay, and after a moment of silence and awkward staring, he finally left. I wondered why he didn't just put in special instructions to not touch the master bathroom vanity if it were so important. But as I was cleaning around it, I noticed there was some makeup on the counter that I knew had only come out a few years ago. This was 2017, and he said his wife died in 2009, but the makeup lying on the counter had a few products that came out no earlier than 2015, and I knew this because I was excited when they came out. And for what it's worth, if this vanity had been preserved, it would have looked a lot worse. If I wasn't sketched out before, I definitely was now. Thankfully, for the rest of the time I was upstairs, he didn't look at me or talk to me. I was dreading going downstairs, but I was halfway done and just needed to get the rest of it over with. I got to the kitchen and started there. From the kitchen, you could see the living room, and again, something was off. This guy had 0 pictures hanging up. I've cleaned so many homes, hundreds at this point, and I've never seen a house with no pictures. Even people that lived alone had at least holiday cards of other people's families on their fridge. I don't know why it freaked me out so much, but it did. And right when I decided I was just gonna do the rest really fast and cut some of the cost for him, he appeared in the archway and asked if I could do him a favor. I hesitantly asked what, to which he said he knows it specifically says no basement, but he forgot he's having guests over next week, and that was where the pool table and everything was, and he just wants it quickly vacuumed. I told him I was on a really tight schedule and wasn't sure if I could do it today, but maybe next time. He then said I could skip the dining room because it's never in use and just do the basement floors instead. I responded, explaining that I could come back tomorrow and do the whole basement instead of just the floors if he wanted, just trying to push it off a little bit. But this was when his whole demeanor changed. He started to get really weird and said that he just wants the floor done and he couldn't understand why I wouldn't just do it today. He went on to say that he and his wife really needed the floors done down there. His wife? The one that had died years ago. That was the moment I realized that this guy was clearly trying to do something horrible, but I didn't know what. I told him, if I have time I will.
Well, can I just show you what needs to get done down there? It won't take long, just really quick.
Knowing he wasn't going to stop, I pretended to get a phone call, so I went to the other room. I then called my friend to explain what was happening. He was still watching me carefully, so I spoke in Spanish, praying he didn't know any. She agreed to drive to this address and make sure when I left he didn't try to follow me, or worse. I got off the phone and told him that I had a family emergency and I could come back tomorrow to finish everything, which was obviously a lie. He looked at me with the coldest look on his face and replied,
"Don't bother."
Then he walked upstairs while I gathered my things. I knew I wasn't going to get paid, but at this point, I just felt lucky to leave. My friend got there while I was loading my trunk, and the guy was staring at me through the window the entire time. I left, and when I got home I called the police to tell them what happened, but there wasn't much they can do, since he didn't break the law, he was just being creepy. They basically just told me the obvious, to not go there again, which I clearly wasn't going to. Just a reminder for everyone, if you provide a service through sites like Craigslist, there's no sure way to tell who's weird and who's not. So make sure to trust your gut and always let someone know the address you're going to and when you're supposed to leave, just in case. I don't know what was wrong with that guy or what he had planned for me in that basement, but I hope nobody else has to find out.